I don't want to. I want to begin just by announcing some of the wonderful occasions that occurred this week with some Mazel Tovs. We have a Mazel Tov in advance of Sunday for Fran and Harold Biller on the occasion of the upcoming wedding of their daughter Lauren to Adam, which will take place this Sunday. We also want to wish Mazel Tov to Patty and Asher Rhyme on the birth of a grandson born to their children Jordan and Sarah. We are so sorry they can't participate in what will be a Shabbos bris, because everyone's participating on Brit and they can't go to via Zoom, and Shabbos Brits make that very difficult, but we wish them Mazel Tov. We are with you in spirit, as we know you are with your grandson in spirit, and we wish you many, many more smachot in the future. We also want to wish Mazel Tov to Rabbi David and Rebbetzin Zlati Weinberger on the birth of twins, grandson and granddaughter. Let me clarify that, on the birth of grandchildren who are twins, a grandson and a granddaughter. And I want to re-emphasize the message last week where we wished Mazel Tov to all the graduates. I know this week was filled with graduation ceremonies, drive-in, Zoom, and it was for the images and the clips that I saw, it was a wonderful celebration under the circumstances, and we wish them, all the graduates, success in all their endeavors. So we will now turn, in the moments that we have before us, to a little bit of learning, to think about this week's parasha. And if we think about the broader context, there is no shortage of sibling rivalry in the Bible. Envy and resentment erupt in every single age, on almost every single page. At the dawn of humankind, we read a fratricide. At the dawn of Yosef's rise, his brothers cast him aside, and between those two times, Yishmael and Yitzchak clash, and Esav and Yaakov collide. Bitter jealousies, nasty hostilities, rancor, and resentment fester in so many fraternal encounters where affection might have flourished. Spite takes root. But if there were ever to be siblings destined for a deeper communion, an alliance of genetic echoes fated for an indestructible union, it would have to be the three children of Amram and Yocheved, which are Aaron, Miriam, and Moshe. Together, they were the tripod that propped up God's chosen nation. They were the human powers responsible for our ancestors' continued emancipation, and in the eyes of rabbinic tradition, it was Miriam and Aaron and Moshe who facilitated our ancestors' wilderness acclimation, because it was in their merit that we had food and water and protection. But at the end of this week's parsha, even this supreme spiritual triplicate turn on each other. V'tidaber Miriam v'Aaron v'Moshe. Miriam and Aaron spoke against their brother Moses, and it seems that even Aaron and Miriam were unable to master the subtle impulses of envy. Even they could not evade the snare of jealous resentment. As Miriam says, Harak ach Moshe diber Hashem? Has God only spoken to Moses? Halo gambanu diber? Has he not spoken to us as well? There is in this question, these rhetorical jibes at Moshe, an insinuation of Mosaic arrogance, of sanctimonious superiority. The unspoken subtext of Miriam's question is, who does Moshe think he is? And then the next verse in the Torah is surprising. We're told, as if to rebut this slander, we're told, Moshe anav ma'od. Moses was incredibly humble. Mikol ha'adam ashal pnei ha'adama, more than any person on the face of the earth. And here is my question. Why now, in the wake of his siblings' slander, are we being told that Moshe is humble? We have known Moshe literally from the day that he was born. We have watched him grow and witnessed time and again his self-effacement. When God first charges him with the task of leading a people, it takes 7 days to persuade him, because Moshe saw himself as lacking the charisma, the inspiration, or the oratorical capacity needed to free and then lead a nation. And later, when Israel's fate seemed sealed for annihilation, Moshe offers himself in their stead. He pleads for their future and is willing to give up his own. This is a man whose soul we see is shot through with modesty. This is a figure whose spirit is born of humility. So why on earth now, after an obviously inaccurate accusation, a patently envious mischaracterization of Moshe, do we need to be reminded of what we already know? And there are two readings to this reaction, to the verse's eruption and impulse to remind us of Moshe's character. There are two ways to read and explain this that I'll share with you briefly this afternoon. And we begin with the Ramban, with Nachmanides. And he says, Yazkir anvantunato. We mention Moshe's humility here, shesaval velo anam, because he endured the slander and he did not respond. Moshe knew in the eyes of Nachmanides that his brother and sister had defamed him. He knew that they had privately maligned him, but he said nothing. He was so disheartened and disappointed to know that his siblings thought so lowly of him. He was pained that Miriam, the older sister who had watched over him in the crib and then in the river, and Aaron, the older brother who had stood shoulder to shoulder with him against an empire, now saw him as self-righteous. He was in pain and felt betrayed, but for the Ramban, he said nothing. And this silence for Nachmanides is precisely what our verse comes to explain. Why doesn't Moshe respond? Why doesn't he censure his siblings? We are advised in the eyes of Nachmanides of Moshe's humility not to rebuke the content of the slander, which is obviously inaccurate, but to explain Moshe's lack of response to it. It is not a testimony to his character, but a vindication of his present behavior. It was Moshe's abject humility that shaped his silence. So humility for Nachmanides is thus the suppression of indignation, the quelling of internal discontent. It is the concealing of a seething over an injustice towards the self. It is the curbing of the urge to defend one's honor. To refuse to refute untruths about our character takes enormous, colossal, Herculean restraint. It means absorbing denigration. And that for Nachmanides is exactly what Moshe did, and he did it to a degree that no one else on earth would endure. But the Netziv could not disagree more with Nachmanides. That is not in any way, shape, or form what is meant when we're told that Moshe was humble, because not only was Moshe not suppressing pain, in the eyes of the Netziv, Moshe barely noticed what his siblings said. In his words, be'emet, in truth, Moshe lo chashash klal lazer. Moshe was not concerned one whit about what they said. Moshe was not disheartened or disappointed in Miriam and Aaron's slander. His silence was not a titanic feat of restraint. It was an indication of total indifference. Moshe was unperturbed, undisturbed, and untroubled by their unfounded accusation, and that is why their provocative claims are followed by a dead silence, and that is why we're told that Moshe was so humble. For the Netziv, humility is not a matter of suppression or resilience. It is not an exercise in restraint or just absorbing scorn. Humility does not mean keeping irritations to oneself. Crucially, it means paying less attention to oneself. As one thinker has crisply put it in a sentence that I hope I will always remember, humility is not about thinking less of yourself. It is about thinking of yourself less. Humility is not about thinking less of yourself. It is about thinking of yourself less. Moshe was silent at this moment after the assault on his reputation for the Netziv, because the state of his reputation could not have been further from his mind. He had a nation to lead, a people to teach, values to disseminate, and a vision to enact. He was entrusted with the future of Israel and ultimately humankind. So every fiber of his mind was devoted to advancing that cause. Every ounce of his strength was committed to fulfilling his charge, not defending his character. In the words of another 19th century commentator of Mecklenburg, Nefesh kol echad mi Yisrael, each and every Jewish soul at that time, haya yakar be'einav, was more precious in Moshe's eyes, nefesh atzma, than his own soul. It was not that Moshe chose to suppress his disappointment or chose to restrain his own pain. He failed to respond to his siblings' claim because he was preoccupied with the pain of others and attending to the welfare of a nation. It was not that he thought less of himself, but that he thought of himself less. And read this way, Moshe's humility was in fact a form of philanthropy, a word which literally translates philanthropy as love of humankind. Philosophy, philo means love. Sophie is knowledge. Philosophy is the love of knowledge. Philo-Semitism is the love of Jews. Philanthropy is the love of human beings. And Moshe's humility here is not to pay attention to assaults on his character because he is involved with the care of others. Now, earlier this week, I think it was Monday, possibly Tuesday, Solomon Xiang, director of Berkeley's Global Policy Laboratory, published in conjunction with a vast team of researchers and analysts an assessment of the impact of the measures that we've all been observing these past months to stay at home, to socially distance, to limit physical interaction. And his findings and his team's findings were simply stunning. They studied the numbers and the models in 6 countries in which there have been COVID-19 outbreaks, in China and Iran and France and Italy, South Korea, and the United States. And in a single sentence, Xiang said as follows: I don't think any human endeavor has ever saved so many lives in such a short period of time. In the United States alone, on the basis of this study, we have come together by staying apart and averted more than 60 million infections. And had those infections happened, the fatality rate would have been in excess of anything that we've seen, because healthcare systems would not simply have been overwhelmed or besieged, they would have collapsed. There would not have been enough beds or rooms or nurses or equipment to prevent preventable deaths. I'm sure we all remember at the peak of this crisis how bodies were being treated. And in Xiang's words again, it's as if the roof was about to cave in, and we caught it before everyone was crushed. It was difficult, he says, and exhausting, and we are still right now holding it up. But by coming together, we did something as a society that nobody could have done alone and which has never, ever been done before. And the reason that I mentioned Xiang's study in the context of our discussion is for one reason, and it's just to say thank you to all of you for your humility and philanthropy. Because the last few months have been trying and full of sacrifice and anxiety, and those sacrifices and anxieties will continue to linger for a while longer. But together we have done more for each other than we can begin to imagine. I want you to look at the other faces on the screen right now and think to yourself that they are here today in part because of decisions and sacrifices that you made. There will always be cynical whispers from within and without, seeking to diminish our worth or plague our lives with doubt, which can fill our minds with ego. But like Moshe, let us not think less of ourselves and turn to narcissism, but think of ourselves less and cast those whispers, that gossip, aside. Let us recognize the impact of our sacrifice and take pride in our humility and all our philanthropy. As one of America's most revered presidents once said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And these past few months, every single one of you has answered that call. So I want to thank you again, and I want to infuse you to the extent I can. I want to inspire you to carry on fighting this good fight, to see worth and purpose in the sacrifice that we're making, and as please God, things continue to improve in our region. Keep those lessons of philanthropy and humility that Moshe exhibited, to keep them alive. I want to wish you all a Shabbat of rest and health and peace and purpose. I will now give you all the chance to, okay,